We've had them on before. Barbara Anderson, who's the Executive Director of Citizens for Limited Taxation, and Jim Braude joins us. He's the Executive Director of the Tax Equity Alliance of Massachusetts, otherwise known as TEAM.
You got it.
TEAM, what's the goal of changing the tax code, and what's the proposal, and why by constitutional amendment?
Well, the reason we're doing it is to give Barbara something to do with her time.
She needs that, doesn't she?
Exactly. But probably more importantly, taxation should be based on ability to pay. It's a pretty simple concept.
Progressive.
Progressive taxation. And we have a tax system in this state, as we're sitting here today, where low-income people pay twice as much of their income to all state and local taxes as millionaires do. Middle-income people 1.5 times as much. The best way to try to correct that is to implement a tax system, again, that's based on ability to pay. And all the graduated income tax means is that wealthy people will pay at a higher rate, low and middle income people at a lower rate, and will restore some balance and fairness to a tax system that's one of the worst in the country. And ironically, by the way, one of the worst in the country because of some of the issues Barbara's talked about through the years, over-reliance on things like the property tax. We're going to try to correct that. Now, as to your other question, why the Constitution? Because we're one of the few states, I think there are only 2 that I'm aware of, that actually has a constitutional prohibition on a graduated income tax. There have been 4 attempts to get rid of it, and I say they were defeated. Barbara will say they were crushed. She happens to be right. They were defeated 3 or 4 to 1 every single time, and we're convinced the 5th time is the last time and will be the first successful one.
And all righty, well, Barbara, you've got some marching orders.
Well, fortunately, the people in Massachusetts did have sense enough to defeat the graduated income tax before. The theme that Jim sets here, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, has been debunked by European experience and Russian experience. So I hope we're not going to try to do that in the United States of America, particularly in Massachusetts, where we already have one of the highest tax burdens in the country.
Yeah, but
if on top of that,
the rich pay 50% and that the poor, that the poor are paying 50%, the rich not as much.
Never mind the rich. Let's talk about the working class person, the person who works 2 jobs, the person who works overtime. Under Jim's system, under a graduated income tax, that person gets pushed into a higher tax bracket just because he's working a little bit harder than somebody else because he's putting in extra time. And then, of course, inflation naturally pushes you into a higher tax bracket. So the real reason they're doing this is because Jim, who represents the public employee unions and the welfare constituency in Massachusetts, they want more money.
Probably,
and the way to get that money, of course, is to trick people into voting for graduated income tax, saying it's for the rich, sort of like Bill Clinton. And then, of course, as soon as it passes, as soon as the Constitution is changed, then they come in with their real agenda, which is to raise taxes for everybody.
Okay.
Are your facts allowed in this debate, or we're just going to do a fantasy thing? First of all, Barbara says what our agenda is for low and middle income families. You have no idea what the rate structure is going to look like, and I should say in the 4 prior...
what will it
let me
look
just say, in the 4 prior attempts, one of the reasons they lost, in fact, I think the principal reason, is people were asked to buy a pig in a poke. They weren't told specifically how their family would be affected. In fact, despite what Barbara said, every low and middle income family in the state will either see their taxes be the same or go down under our proposal. The only families who will see their taxes go... We don't have a number yet. We'll have it in about 2 weeks. But clearly people...
Just give me an estimate.
Bill Clinton says it's $30,000.
Well, first of all, Bill Clinton is not drafting this rate structure. And is it correct
People trusted him, too.
First of all, there's one difference. Bill Clinton was on a campaign, had nothing on paper. The people will be able to vote on this rate structure next November, Barbara, just like they voted on Prop 2.5 in 1980. Low and middle income families can vote themselves a tax break. I believe a lot of wealthy people, as long as they know exactly how much their taxes will go up, will vote for equity.
$30,000, that's what Bill Clinton said.
Well, again, Bill Clinton is not doing this. Barbara, you don't want to talk about Massachusetts. You want to talk about California,
political reality, which is you people will say anything you have to say.
Well, you don't want me to answer the question, Barbara, do you? Because you're not going to like the answer.
The answer is...
I'll answer the question since it's our proposal. The vast majority of people, families making less than $100,000 a year, will either see their taxes go down or stay the same. The vast majority of people whose family income is over $100,000 a year will see their taxes go up. We'll have a precise number by the time August comes around, and by next November, when people vote, every single family can figure out exactly how they'll be affected, so they don't have to trust me, they don't have to trust her, they can trust themselves to vote the right choice.
Problem know exactly. The change in the Constitution is permanent. All the change in the Constitution says that he's proposing is from now on, we can tax people at higher rates if they work harder and earn more.
It says
that's
that,
all
Barbara?
it says.
It says that?
That's exactly what it means, because that's what it says.
Why don't you say what it says rather than your interpretation?
It says that if people have higher incomes, they have to pay more, and lower incomes pay less. So if people work harder and work 2 jobs and work overtime and get a pay raise, just a pay raise, then they have to pay more. That's in the Constitution. What he's talking about, his rate structure that shows that everybody but Ted Kennedy gets a tax break, That rate structure is only a statute, and that will be amended and will be changed by the legislature with the support of Jim Braude and his members, the public employee union, and the welfare advocates.
One minute, you're saying that the legislative vehicle will be changed, that all of a sudden where you've had restraints in the legislature that you'll no longer have that sort of control because they'll be able to make those decisions.
And what they can do with the graduated income tax is they can change the rates for one small group at a time. If you make $22,000, one year they can increase your taxes, the next year they'll increase the taxes of people earning $30,000. They pick us off.
Let's get back to
one
the facts.
income.
What are the restraints going to be?
It's a law. It will be a law for people to vote for, just like, by the way, that thing called Prop 2.5 is just a law, not a constitutional amendment. Number two, the legislature, as we sit here today without a graduated income tax, can raise everybody's taxes. The only thing they can't do is raise them fairly. If you make $20,000 a year or $2 million a year, you're raised at the same rate. What our thing will allow the legislature to do, with popular support, is ask wealthy people to pay a fair share. And essentially what your agenda is, Barbara, is to ensure that the least vulnerable amongst us, the people at the top, aren't asked to pay more because that's who you really represent.
Keep in mind that we were the ones who did Proposition 2.5. Jim's members opposed it, so they never cared about regressive back then. They still fight Proposition 2.5. What this does is now, if they want to increase the income tax, the legislature, they have to increase it for all of us, as Jim says, at the same time. So there's a natural outcry from everybody.
In other words, it has to go across the board regardless.
Under the
you think that's
graduated
good,
income
Barbara?
tax
You think
structure,
that's a better way to go, don't you?
politically, it gives us a fighting chance to oppose it. Where under Jim's concept, they can raise the income tax on one income group one year, the next income group
Barbara,
the next year,
let's
and there's never a concerted effort to fight this increase. So they'll get all the money they've ever wanted for their constituency, which is the welfare system and the human service
and the religious
advocates.
community and environmentalists and business leaders who are supporting this. Now, let's talk about the flat tax that you like right now. Barbara, let's talk about it. How many times, wait. How many times has the income tax, the flat income tax that you say is so hard to raise, been raised in the last 3 or 4 years?
Twice.
It hasn't stopped them there, has it?
It was at least a major fight.
It
at least
hasn't
we
stopped
had a
them there,
chance.
has it?
Because your members always are up there asking for more money, demanding more money, insisting that more money be spent on your members, and now what you're into is getting more money through a graduated income tax
Jim will have a chance at rebuttal when we come back. The debate will continue in a minute, whether we should graduate to a graduated income tax. Barbara Anderson and Jim Braude. And Jim, if we have a constitutional amendment and the legislature is able to go out and raise taxes as they see the need, does this take citizens groups like Barbara's and other public interest groups from having some sort of a say with that legislature that likes to raise taxes?
No, it's a law like anything else. As I just said to Barbara a minute ago, one, they can raise taxes today, tomorrow, last week, as they have. Here, they now have the power to raise them fairly, looking to the wealthy more than low and middle-income families. But secondly, Jeanine, the way Barbara's talking is as if this is some radical notion. Every Western democracy, you talked about Europe, the United States of America, 35 of the 42 states that have an income tax, graduate rates. This is the mainstream way to tax people in America so that there's fairness in the system. We don't have it now. I think it's great that Barbara's saying she prefers the current system. She prefers the double taxation of interest and dividends that senior citizens depend upon.
Oh, no, wait a minute, Jeanine, come on. We fought that double system on
Is that the law that you're supporting?
We opposed that double tax on unearned income. Your members talked Mike Dukakis into vetoing it when we got that law changed.
When we propose eliminating it as part of this rate structure, you're going to oppose it, aren't you?
Eliminating it, they're doing it as a statute. No, we support it completely.
A law, just like Prop 2.5,
but not in return
Barbara.
for graduated income tax, because once you talk senior citizens into voting for the graduated income tax, you will take away their privilege and raise their
right
back
again. Give them the facts and we'll make
your
a
members,
decision.
How would it take it away from senior
tax.
citizens, Barbara? How would it take it away from citizens?
What Jim is going to do is he's going to create a statute that will give any taxpayer out there anything he wants. He's going to try to fool the public into supporting a statute that will give them anything they want. And I say, fine, we'll support the statute, but in order to have the statute, they have to give him a graduated income tax. Once he and his members get that graduated income tax, the statute disappears. We've been able to keep 2.5
in other words, you're saying it's going to be unchecked down on that level.
It is unbelievable, the level of arrogance. Barbara, who really grew up on ballot politics, one, I am not passing the law. I have no power. If the public doesn't vote for it in November of '94, there isn't a law. If they do vote for it, the people have spoken. Number two, the reality of our great power in the legislature. We oppose the state tax repeal, Barbara. We got one vote in the House. The reality is that people will make the decisions and the people will protect it.
Let me introduce a question then. What about business? What about capital gains?
What we're going to do, well, we don't have a specific proposal yet, but essentially what we're going to do, at least this is the outlines of it, is the current capital gains tax break in the state, which is one of the most dramatic in the country. You sell art, gold, collectibles, those sort of things, no great productivity. They don't do anything for the economy. We're wiping that out completely. We're going to protect the capital gain that the person sees when they sell their principal residence, and we're going to create a new investment tax break for people who choose to invest long time in Massachusetts businesses that create jobs. That's good for the economy. It's going to, let me finish, Barbara.
Well, yeah,
it's going to create jobs. No, I haven't finished the notion. I'm trying to answer the question, Barbara.
Okay.
This is the organization.
Thirdly, what else is good for the for business community is if we transfer close to $500 million in tax liability away from middle-income people and onto the wealthy, middle-income people are going to spend that money in local communities to help tired local
economies.
economies.
Are going to pay higher taxes. This is the organization that tried to double the capital gains tax just a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, failed in the legislature. This is what Paul Songas said last week about the graduated income tax. The Grad tax is another thunderbolt of anti-business ideology, which is the last thing this state needs. Now, once people vote for graduated income tax, they're going to penalize anybody who wants to work harder, create jobs, get ahead, in return for a statute that will disappear as soon as people get suckered into supporting the constitutional
Barbara, then
amendment.
why don't we just abolish government? If every statute that we don't like, if every statute we don't like is just going to disappear because you say it is, then why don't we just close down government and only have constitutional amendments?
Prop 2.5 would have disappeared 10 years ago if I went up there screaming bloody murder every time they tried to touch it. Jim Braude will not be up there defending his statute because his members are going to want to see the taxes increased.
All right. Well, beyond the political hubris involved on either
But everything is political hubris. That's
but
what
the thing is
that
there has to be something where the general public has to at times feel that they fight government or big government or even. But then do we become when do we have good government that's equitable across the board?
Well, the beauty of ballot politics, by the way, in terms of involving people, Barbara wants to talk about what might happen later. For the next 18 months, thanks to people like you, by the way, people are going to hear the facts about this debate. Barbara hasn't used many of the facts tonight, but once the rate structure is out, people are going to see exactly what they're going to get for their vote, or their yes vote, or their no vote. We can debate that for 18 months. Everybody will know what they do on election day.
But what's going to happen to the economy? I mean, will this take people and have them fleeing the borders to go to the states that border us?
State with no income tax like New Hampshire, that's an economic powerhouse.
Is that what's going to happen?
For instance, Europe has been in decline for the last 10 years.
Because of the graduated income tax.
That hasn't helped. Let's talk about California. California has a graduated rate structure. Do you know where the rich start in California? They start paying 8% on their income at $26,000. They are really rich at $30,000 when they pay 9.3%. That is a graduated income tax structure in California.
Do you think if we propose that rate structure in Massachusetts that we get one single vote?
Of course you won't propose it. You'll wait till after the
But how do we know what the rate structure is?
And then you do it.
A law, Jeanine, like any other law that you talk about.
But does it change? Will it be a law that's etched in stone?
Of course not.
Or will it, as it's graduated, it's going to flow with the time?
First of all, it should flow with the times unless you want to abolish the governor's chair and elector and representative democracy. When changes should be made in laws, those people are paid to make them. The job of the public, people like Barbara, you, me, and fellow citizens, is to lobby legislators, to be vigilant.
But you can't lobby on this because in 1 year the legislature and Jim will be in there to increase taxes for people making, say, $25,000 to $25,400. Well, that's one very small constituency to call their legislators. Everyone else isn't going to get a tax increase. So they'll get that this year. The next year they come after the people. That's right. They'll pick us off one. That's right. That's why they want it, because they can get a tax increase every year.
All right. One question in closing has got to be 2 seconds long. When will we have the rates that we can look at the slide?
The rate structure it's got to be filed with the Secretary of State by August 4th. Within the month, absolutely. And people have a year to look at it.
What we'll be looking for, and we'll re-examine the whole topic. Special thanks to my feisty guests for joining us this evening. I just love them. And thank you for joining us, too, with this edition of At Issue. I'm Jeanine-Graf. Good night.